have to change him out and fix him sometimes, but he's going to go through that. We're not going to play a whole host of commercials, but I do want to thank the sponsors of the show. One is the Irrigation Association. Second one is the Toro Company, Site One Landscape Supply, Duraplastics, and another company which I have to have some bad news about is a company called Weldon. Great products, nothing bad about that, but their president, Fabio Castellanos, has passed away. So we have our thoughts and prayers out to his family and to the people at Weldon there. They've been great sponsors over the years. They make a super product, and anyway, they have our blessings, and anything that we can do to help, we appreciate it.
Our best wishes to them.
Yeah, wanted to say that. So what I'm going to do now is introduce our special guest and moderator for this session. His name is Mr. Daigle.
Yes, how you doing?
And he is the owner of Irrigator Tech. And we'll be playing a little commercial during the break about his business. He's been in the business a long time. He does with the Green Industry Hall of Fame. And we'll let him speak a little about his background before we start his speech. For those of you who are listening and or watching, during the break, we're going to announce what the code is. So that's proof that you listen to the show or are listening or watching. And then when you send an email to the IA, you just give this code number, and that shows that you participated in this, and then you'll get your CEU credit for that. So it's pretty simple. For people who want to call in, and we will take questions, please do so. Toll-free number is 888-909-1050. If you're local, or doesn't matter if you want to dial long distance or you pay for that on your phone, 909-792-5222. So please do that. You can also listen by phone at 701-801-4444. You can watch the video live, the presentation, at KCAAradio.com. You can also go to Ustream Tiki Live. And iHeartRadio, so we're all over the map and all over that. So that's pretty good for us, I think. Chris, any words before we go into this?
No, just to note that July is Smart Irrigation Month. Maybe we should make a quick mention of that because it's the first show in July, and we'll feature a little more information and some other stories about during the month of July for Smart Irrigation Month. So.
And we're also getting our email address for the contest that we said we're going to do.
That's coming up, yep.
And we were hoping to have it on the June 28th, but our IT department didn't get to it yet. So hopefully we'll have it next week, and then we can start the contest and win lots of prizes for our listeners. So I'd like to turn it over and want to welcome Mr. Daigle. I call him Mr. because he's a super pro in what he does. Why don't you give a little background? I feel funny telling everybody about you.
Do a little 30-second commercial.
30-second commercial. Started in the landscape industry many years ago, and actually at like 12 years old. My parents said, hey, go out and start earning money. You do work here and to live here. So I went around to everybody in the neighborhood and picked up dog doo-doo and got $5 a month for each dog and started growing into that. And then I could afford a lawnmower, irrigation, and just started doing all my neighbors' houses. And that's where my beginning was. And then I did ROP, which a lot of schools have an ROP program, and I learned all about working with the landscape, and then moved from that to Cal Poly and did a lot of stuff there, and started Irrigator Tech, which is a training school, irrigatortech.com. You can always check us out. You can go to LCC, Landscape Certified Contractors Association. .com, and that's us as an organization. And then we have a lot of great Latino people that are members of the Association of Landscape, and it's allpro.org when you go to that website, and you'll see all the great stuff. You can click on it, and everything's in Spanish, so it's really awesome. And we've got some great trainers, got great people for English and Spanish, and we have weekend classes. Consumers can come to some of the classes that we have just for consumers as well. So it's not just professionals. We're probably 90% professionals, but the weekends we have a heck of a lot of consumers wanting to know about drip and little things they can do to save water.
Absolutely. So why don't we get into your presentation on valves. We're going to split the screen here, so those of you watching can see what's going on. And again, if you want to call in, please do. We do take questions. It's 888-909-1050 or 909-792-5222.
Okay.
Richard, it's all yours.
Yep. So we're going to talk about valves and valve repair. We have a lot, like Robert said, we have some good things and then things you got to look forward to that may possibly happen in the field. So I like to always show everybody, hey, if you're having this problem, this is the issue. So we're going to go ahead and go. We're going to be covering all sorts of products that going over. So the, Champion, Green Lawn, Griswold, Hunter, Hydro Rain, Nelson, Orbit, Rainbird, Toro, Eritreol, all sorts of different companies. Some companies you probably never heard about, but they're on specialty types of projects that need different types of valves to regulate normally open, normally closed, and hydraulic valves. So some of them are specialty valves, and we'll talk a little bit about each one, depending on how many commercial people are listening or consumers, and then we'll have a little consumer part that we would talk about anti-siphon valves and why we have those and go over each one. So, on the screen, which we'll have is actually an inline globe valve. So on that, what we'll do is have a hydraulic, so it might take a minute, but we're going to pop that up, and it's going to be a globe valve, and you'll see the water on top and the water on the bottom. So what that is, as it pops up, he'll be getting that up there on the screen. And, we have 100 PSI. So on that 100 PSI, the water coming in, yep, there you go. We're looking at it right now. So that's what we consider a globe valve. And every manufacturer has a nice globe valve. And they're all similar to this type of design. All the way when you look at the big ACV valves that are 12-inch, same type of design. So if you had 100 PSI coming down, and then it's going to come up against that seated area there. So it goes up and goes to the upper part of the bonnet. So we call this the 80-20 rule. And what it's going to do is that pressure is going to go up to the upper part of the valve. And because that upper bonnet is larger than the seating area, the pounds per square inch is going to force that seating area down. And what it's going to be is that only the bleed screw that's over to the left or the solenoid, which is the part over to the right with little tubes on it. And what will happen is the plunger will get its 24 volts from the clock, and then the plunger lifts up. So when that lifts up, it automatically makes it come on. So it automatically, you'll see it, yep, the 80-20 rule on it. So 80% of the pressure is on top of the bonnet, and then the 20's on the bottom. So then when you open up the bleed screw on the left, or you open up the solenoid that's on the right, the plunger lifts up. And when it lifts up, the water drops down. And when the water drops down, it makes it so the top of the bonnet would release the pressure, the diaphragm and the seating area will open up, and then the valve comes up and over. So as long as the diaphragm's okay, the rubber part's on top, or the seating area. So if you're maybe fixing something downstream and you look at it and some rocks went into it, any kind of debris, and it puts a little tiny grooves into the seating area, well, that makes it so it doesn't seat down and doesn't hold the 80-20 rule. So any little bug, earwig, stick, anything like that, or any debris that was broken from downline, when it slushes back and forth, it hits that seat. And when it hits the seat, if it puts a ding in it with a rock, then we know, hey, it's weeping and the valves downstream. So those are some of the things you have to look for. So, and this is every valve. It doesn't matter the name brand. They're always going to work that same type of flow. And we'll go over different ones as we go here. So you have a regular valve. The standard valve that you would have there would be a forward flow valve. So a forward flow valve is going to show you and be directly underneath the bottom like you just saw. And then if you tear the diaphragm, so you know, most of your valves. So if you go into your local distributor or anybody out there and say, hey, I want a forward flow valve, if you tear the diaphragm or a rock gets stuck in the seating area, the valve's going to fail open. Yep, so it's going to fail open. Now, a reverse flow valve is going to do the opposite thing. So when you go in and you walk, I mean, out of any brand that you're talking to, you're looking at it and saying, okay, it surrounds around the valve, and then there's a little screen, so it's not coming up the center. So you can see we'll push a button on the bottom. Go back one, sorry. But if we go back one more, there, press open. So I just want to get the PowerPoint so you can see how the water comes on and the water comes off. I think it might work. If it doesn't, that's fine. So what you'd have to do is that the valve's closed, and then when you have the 24 volts, if you can go back one more, it'd be great. And that the valve would open. See where it says open and closed? So if it opens up, the water will actually come through. So you know, you can go to many different websites, go to Google, any of them, click on that, and Toro, Iritrol, all the other name brands that are out there have little videos on this, and you'll be able to click on it and see it open up the valve and how the rule I'm talking about, that 80-20 rule, is working. So you show the water drop down, and then the clock's getting the 24 volts. So every clock, if you're a homeowner, or commercial, and it doesn't matter if you're on the golf course, you're going to have a clock, wires are going to come down, give 24 volts to the solenoid that's on the right-hand side where you see those little wires, and then what that's going to do is open up the diaphragm. Then if you wanted to do it manually, then every single valve on the market will have a manual bleed screw. And that's over to the left that I'm looking at the screen. And what it is that if you just want a manual water, you don't want to walk back. You're at the valve, it's 1,000 feet away. You just open up the little manual bleed screw, and what it does is it makes the valve open up, and then you can check all the heads and then manually turn it off. So no matter where you go to, any retail place or wholesale place, you're going to see a valve, and it's always going to have a solenoid with the 2 wires coming up, and then you're always going to have the bleed screw. So you don't have to worry about, well, I only have this name brand. They all are very, very similar. Okay, we'll go one more. Okay, so now you have a normally closed valve. So in a normally closed valve, the upper part is putting pressure on the top of the diaphragm and closing it. So it stays closed until we give it 24 volts or open up the bleed screw. So the valve is always going to be closed because it has the pressure from the upper top of the bonnet, the top part of that valve. So that would be a normally closed valve. Go ahead and we'll switch to the next one. So you can see where the little solenoid goes and it clicks up and then it shuts it off. So now if you have a normally open valve, you don't see those very often. They're always on commercial jobs. Or if you're from the East Coast, there's a lot of normally open valves. But all the architects, irrigation consultants are using them because it keeps pressure on the downstream side. So the valve stays open. So if you were working all around Anaheim, they use Rainmaster, which is a division of Toro, and they use all those clocks, and every valve has a master valve. So if somebody was leaving Disneyland or leaving some place in Anaheim, and the little kids take the nozzles off, the water shoots in the air because it has a flow meter connected to it, a flow sensor, and what that's going to do is tell the clock that, hey, that sprinkler head is moving too fast and putting out too much water. And what it's going to do is shut it off, automatically call you. So this is what you can have for your house. You just have your professional landscaper, and you can contact many people. You can go to Irrigator Tech, and we have a referral program to make sure you get a professional out there that knows what it is. You put that on. If any sprinkler heads break on your yard, somebody goes by with a skateboard or anything, when the valve comes on, instead of using 30 psi, it's going to use more. paddle wheel goes on the flow meter, and then that flow meter is going to tell the clock in about a minute or less, shut it off. So the normally open valve, instead of staying open, it gets 24 volts from the clock, and then the valve shuts down, and then it will in turn call you up, leave you a message on your phone saying, at Mrs. Smith's house, station 7, one broken sprinkler head. And you can look up that technology, call us, or there's just many manufacturers that are moving into that technology of having where every little sprinkler head, a drip line, or anything breaks, we got to conserve water. So they'll use one normally open valve, and then all the rest of the 6 or 12 are normally closed for all that backup. So you want to make sure that you have it, and you'd want to check it every 30 days. So if you don't have anything broken, every once in a while, just go over, take a nozzle off, turn on the water, see it shoot up like 3 or 4 feet. Automatically, it will shut its off. You know the master valve, the normally open valve shut off. You know the clock set right. And you know that the valve and everything's functioning fine. Because we always want to adjust the valve to the heads and keep that consistent PSI working. All sprinkler heads, no matter what brand, work perfect at a 30 PSI. So you want to make sure the first nozzle and the last nozzle is working at a good pressure, not too high, not too low. Okay? So we want to make sure that when we change it, it's fine. Now, there's multiple, everybody uses regulators. So you can have a regulator on a valve, and what it does is that you got all the same brand, and you're running the rotors. So you have a pump system, and what it's doing is it's running 3 to 4 rotors, maybe on a football field, or maybe in a big grass area in your backyard or some location. Now, when you get closer to around the building, we're going to set some drip. Well, we can do a specialized drip station that we can have a little 1-inch valve with a filter and a regulator, or you can take the same design, the same valve, and have that little regulator to the side. You put a pressure gauge on it as you turn it. So the rotor's going to need 70, 60, 70 PSI, and we're going to need to be in that pressure range, but when we get to the drip, we probably only need 20. So then we turn it, so when the station comes on, that regulates it down so it becomes 20 to 30. So no matter what brand you use, you can go, hey, okay, on these stations are grass and turf. They need more. When on the shrubs, maybe a little less. And hopefully you're using drought-tolerant plants for whatever area. So no matter where you're at in the United States, there's always a nifty 50 plants. And so you look it up, you go to all your horticultural departments and everybody that would be in the ag department and say, what are the top plants that I should grow in my yard? Being in New York, Chicago, California, wherever in the world, you look at it and say, oh, wow, okay, I like these. You go to your local nursery and figure out what you want and the water requirements for those plants. Because we don't want to just have sprinklers water if we don't know the plant requirement. So all the time you can have the best sprinkler system in the world, but then you have to be able to give each plant just as much as it needs, and some plants need more to do well, and some plants use less. So you always have to remember that. You can go to any of your retail or wholesale nurseries and say, hey, what are the requirements? Go on the internet, Google it, and be able to say, hey, I'm going to pick these nozzles, this drip, or this product because it fits the soil, the plants, and as well as the whole yard. So you regulate it and say, hey, I don't need it to have a full pressure of 80 PSI. I only need it to be 20. Then it comes on, it flows through the valve, and all valves have it. Toro has an awesome, Eritreol has an awesome regulating valve that you just turn the little knob and it will tell you 10, 20, 30. It's printed right on it. And many other people have very similar products. So you can use those, regulate it down, and go, hey, on station 6, I need it to be this. On station 7, I got spray heads. And when I'm using spray heads, I need it to be this pressure. So you adjust the valve to the heads. Okay, so then you have dirty water valves. Okay, so everybody produces, the main 3 to 4 manufacturers have a dirty water valve because they're using reclaimed water. They're using valves that are, the down line is breaking, things are happening to it. So what happens is that stuff sucks in the sprinkler head, so somebody hits it with a skateboard or a bicycle or hits it with a weed whip, the head breaks off. You don't notice it because you go out at 4 or 5 in the morning, drive to work, and you just know if it's green or it's brown. And what happens, by the time you look at it, you are having debris, all the bugs, all the little grass clippings suck into the sprinkler system, and what it does is it sticks the diaphragm open, and many other things coming upstream. So right now we have a lot of things, a lot of minerals in our water that create calcium and all different deposits that are in the water that make a diaphragm, and all the rubber goods end up getting sticky. If you got reclaimed water or anything else, those debris, those things in the debris will make that valve. So it's not perfectly clean. It's just off the freeways, anywhere, large areas, we're trying to use as much reclaimed water. Or if you have harvesting your water with tanks or anything like that where you're trying to contain water, those particles get inside of there. And they'll clog the diaphragm, and you want it to flush out. So anybody that's in Pasadena, Arcadia, California, the city of San Jose has old hydraulic valves. You really don't see these very often anymore. But what we started with in our industry many years ago, and this is like way in the beginning with Chris and Rob when they wore their wooden shoes and stuff and barely got there, even though I look like an old man.
I still have my clogs.
Yeah, he still has his clogs, and he's still going along. But, you know, we didn't use electricity to turn the valve on. We used a little 1/8 hydraulic tube that ran from the clock and then went to the valve. Now, I know that in Ontario there's a lot of houses, Pasadena, and even in the city of San Jose, they have a ton of old valves. So when they bought them, they've got their money's worth. They've been around forever. Now, I was probably just a small child, but Chris Davey and Rob, they were right there. They were right there in the beginning, riding their horses, seeing the sprinklers working, got their wooden shoes on every morning, went uphill to school and uphill home. So that same thing was there.
Snow.
Yeah.
Both ways.
So, you know, old hydraulic valves, that's going back in our history of stuff. But I know that in the East Coast, there are golf courses and people that have them. But whoever has them got their money's worth because they haven't been on the market to buy for probably a good, 30, 40 years. So, but they're an awesome valve. You run a little hose to it instead of electricity. So lightning storms, hydraulic systems, they used to work like champions. So if you've got one, then and need some servicing and stuff, just call us or go on the Irrigator Tech's website. We'll find you a professional. The city of Long Beach has a lot in there, and we've got them some really good people that are awesome at tweaking and making things work for them. So I just wanted to put that in. Now we have globe valves. There's a lot of valves out there all over the United States that they put inline valves and the valve goes through. It's buried underground, so if you're in Detroit, Boise, New York, Chicago, and it's freezing, you got to bury those valves at least 2 to 3 feet and blow out the system in October. Now we have angle valves. That's usually used on freeways or anywhere they want to put something deep that if a car drives over it, they're not going to damage the valve. They may damage the valve box, but they're not going to do the valve itself. So there's many reasons why people use those angles. So we got angle and straight through globe. Every manufacturer has it. Now we have anti-siphon valves. So anti-siphon valves are primarily a California business. So if you looked at it and said, where is 90% of the sales, they're for homeowners or small gas stations and Starbucks and little places, and you don't have to use a backflow. They have to be 12 inches higher than the highest head. So if I have it in my front yard and then it's level and it's nice, and then I go up 4 or 5 feet in my backyard, that anti-siphon might be low, and if it's too low, cha-ching, the water will come out of one side of the valve. So if you got in your backyard 3 to 6 valves and they keep on dumping, there's a little float in there, and that's protecting our drinking water. So anything you put snail abatement or anything up on the hill, you got a little 5-foot area in the backyard, and then you go, hey, it rose too high. Then the water comes back, goes against the anti-siphon part of the valve, and then it will dump that to atmosphere, because we don't want insects, any kind of repellent, fertilizer, anything to come back into our drinking water. So we have 2 choices: use an inline valve and put a backflow in. That's very reasonable. AWWA and all the waterworks department, which AWWA is the American Waterworks Society, and they're a very big sponsor of us here and work with us, and they will tell you that, hey, we promote inline valves with a backflow for safety. And I'll talk more about that. But you have an anti-siphon valve. I would say there's millions of them all throughout California, and you have the valve on one side with the little wires that come up, and on the other side, that protects us. Has to be at least 12 inches higher than the highest head. So if it popping and dumping and you're replacing that little check in there, that's on the brass valves or the plastic, then you don't have the anti-siphon valve high enough. You need to be able to have it so it's fine on there. So I just wanted to make sure, because there's a lot of anti-siphon valves out there to be able to use. Okay, and then we have the master valves, which I just talked about. So now here's a regular globe valve. So if you're looking at it, you'll see it, and there's an arrow. So that's the top of the valve right there. So on the valve, you'll see that little arrow. He'll click it one more time, and it's going to say bonnet, flow control handle. So that flow control handle is, you turn on your valve electrically, and then you go out there and you look at it and say, wow, there's a lot of mist. And you look at your watch and go, wow, it only takes 2 minutes and the water is just running over the sidewalk, going down the curbs. We adjust the flow control. It's not adjusting the pressure. It's on the speed of how fast the water is going through that valve. So we would adjust that. Now the next part he just did was a solenoid. So that, with a black piece on it with the wires coming out, that is a solenoid. Those 2 wires, one's the common and then one's the station that you're working with. And that goes all the way back to your clock. And in that clock, you have a common, which loops into every single station, and then you have a station wire. So if you got 12 stations, you're going to have 12 station wires on it.
And 12 common wires.
And, yeah, and they all have the common clicking to it. So if you say after a certain station, so if you're having a problem in the field and you go, hey, from 1 to 9 works fine, but everything after is dead, well, then you have a problem with the common. So there's certain sequences that you need to go through. And then there's the bonnet. The upper part of the valve is a bonnet, and the pieces that are holding it together, so then the pressure up in the upper part of the body. Then the bottom part, where the arrow is, you'll see an arrow on everybody's valve, and one is the outlet, and the other side is the inlet. Okay? So never screw them wrong, because you'll be going, what's wrong? And I've had people call us and say, no matter what I do, I can't get the valve open. Did you accidentally put it in backwards? Oh, I don't know. And I said, the black part with the wires coming out, is it on the outlet side? And then they get on their phone and FaceTime me or send it, and I go, you accidentally put it backwards. And I've had many jobs that people have called me, professionals that haven't been highly educated, but they do commercial jobs out there, and they put in the valves backward, and once one person does it, all the valves do it.
You know, I think it's a good time for take a minute. 2 reasons. One, we'll play a commercial, but 2, if people are watching and they need to make a rest stop or get another drink, give a little 1-minute break here, and then we'll come back and continue. So anybody who wants to listen in and who are listening in, don't forget to call in. If you have questions, please do. 888-909-1050 or 909-792-5222. And we'll be back in just 1 minute, so stick around for a second, and I'll give you the code for the class at that point as well.
Did you know that an irrigation system that has a leak of just 1/32 of an inch in diameter, that's the thickness of a dime, wastes 6,300 gallons of water per month or 75,000 gallons per year? Well, with more solvent cement experience than anyone on the planet, Weldon formulates their products not just to meet a standard, but to exceed it. Weldon products are designed to provide even greater safety margins, often able to make up for common mistakes or less than ideal installation conditions, reducing the chance for leaks and costly callbacks. Weldon's invention of solvent cement over 60 years ago revolutionized the piping industry. From day one, Weldon has led the industry with their broad range of high-performing solvent cements, primers, and cleaners, bringing unique solutions to professional contractors and homeowners. Along the way, Weldon has earned the loyalty of millions of professional contractors who trust their products and depend on their outstanding customer service, live technical hotline, troubleshooting services, and free training. And because they care about the environment, Weldon was the first manufacturer to develop and offer a complete line of low VOC cements. Their hottest formulation is Weldon 750 Hot Weld, a one-step, fast-setting blue PVC solvent cement specifically formulated for superior, long-term, trouble-free performance. So whether you're a professional contractor or just a backyard do-it-yourselfer, choose Weldon, the trusted global leader in solvent cements for leak-free plastic piping systems. To learn more about their complete line of products or technical training, visit the web at www.weldon.com or call their technical service hotline at 877-477-8327.
Are you presently part of the irrigation industry as a worker or business owner? Do you want to learn how you and your staff can boost your knowledge and productivity? Then you should check out Irrigator Technical Training School. Irrigator Tech is the leading source of quality instruction serving all facets of the irrigation industry. Their courses provide a basic, easy-to-understand approach that raises the skill level, competency, and professionalism of landscape and irrigation personnel through practical education and services. Irrigator Tech combines classroom and real-life hands-on training, leading to a well-recognized certification that both customers and employers demand. Irrigator Tech's specialized courses can help you quickly become a certified irrigation auditor or a certified installer, repair, maintenance, or backflow technician. Courses also include certificates in smart water application or becoming a certified tree worker. Most importantly, all certifications are state recognized, and Irrigator Tech offers annual renewal classes to help keep your certification up to date. So whether you work in California, Washington, Oregon, Nevada, or Arizona, there's an Irrigator Tech class near you. For more information on how to jumpstart your career, call Irrigator Tech toll-free 866-614-1755 or visit them on the web at irrigatortech.com. That's toll-free 866-614-1755 and on the web at irrigatortech.com.
And welcome back to the second half of our IA class. And also one thing that you should know, aside from Irrigator Tech, you want to become certified and be IA certified as well. And so you go to irrigation.org, get some information about how to become a certified irrigation auditor, water manager, and a bunch of different courses and things. Having that knowledge if you're a professional, is going to help you increase your knowledge and your value to your customer. And for anybody who just does it for the backyard or front yard DIYer, you learn a lot of stuff, because the last thing you want to have is people coming to your home and telling you what's wrong with the system when it's really not wrong. And you'll be more educated about it, and that's important. I think homeowners should really know about their system so they're not fooled by anybody. There's good people in the landscape business, and there's also people who aren't so good. But you want to try to get a reliable person going to Irrigator Tech or contacting the IA to see who's a certified irrigation person is an important factor to do. So anyway, I'm going to turn it back to Mr. Richard Daigle of Irrigator Tech to continue on valves. And also, I hope you're going to discuss the differences between AC and DC solenoids, because a lot of people don't understand those
Yes,
either.
absolutely.
All right, it's all yours.
Okay, so he'll go one more on it. So absolutely, as Robert said, you want to look at all your local standards. You know, if you're buying a new house or doing some investigations, you want to look at it and make sure you do a good audit on the irrigation. You want to make sure that you surround yourself around somebody that's professional, has his contractor's license, and not just a contractor's license. If he's showing you the IA logo, the CLCA logo, or Irrigator Tech's logo, call and say, hey, are they good? Did they pass? Make sure that you get somebody that's doing it. If you need an arborist to come trim trees, make sure they're a certified arborist. Because then you can always feel safe. You know, I know that we're always looking for the most reasonable price on the market, but sometimes being reasonable, it ends up costing you a lot more. Every day I go out and I see stuff and think, wow, somebody paid for this, and I really do feel bad. And then you don't have any recourse on being able to. But if you have a problem in the field, and I know as Irrigator Tech or even the CLCA or any organization in New York, Chicago, anywhere, and you say, hey, one of your members did work and I'm having lots of problems, they'll make sure that you're stand up. The IA and any organization nationwide will say, hey, they're a member, and if they did something, we want to make sure we have a good standard. And if you don't have that, and they do not show pride in showing the logos of the associations nationwide, then you don't have anything to stand on. So definitely you want to look at your reasonable prices, but you want to see who they're associated with, what product they recommend, that it's commercial, and that they have a good standing with their organization of doing professional work out in the field. Definitely, absolutely. So, you know, we did the valve. We went through it. There's the bleed screw. So where it says bleed screw on it, that is, you know, manually going over to it and just turning that little screw right there with a screwdriver and stuff. Then you do have the solenoid, the flow control, that spring that's in the inside. So if you take the valve apart and you pull on that spring, they're all set about 5 pounds pressure on it. It's that if the 80-20 rule changes a little bit for some reason, or the pressure lowers, that little 5-pound spring will push it closed and make sure that it goes closed. The rubber in the diaphragms, you want to make sure that you have a really good diaphragm and a professional from a good manufacturer that you're using in the field. So don't overdo the spring. Always make sure that you're checking the diaphragm using O-ring lube, and always make sure that you do have the valve on the outlet and the valve in the inlet. So the same thing here. So the reason why I'm showing you multiple different valves, they all have, as you can see, a bleed screw, an inlet, an outlet, a solenoid. So find definitely the manufacturer that you like to stick with. So that manufacturer, you want to know, if you go to a distributor, who is the manufacturer's representative and what, you know, who are they, because they'll stand behind the product. So if you're buying a Toro product or anybody else's Irritrol, find out who the local manufacturer's representative is and say, hey, I just want to know, you know, how's the product? Is it working? Is it great? And all that. They love to hear from the people in the field. So that is definitely. Now you have your solenoids here. So here's, it says facts on the valves. So they're both activated by the bleed screw and the solenoid. So it's getting 24 volts, or you're manually opening. Anything that's going to be purple or any color blue is going to be reclaimed water on it. You know, so anything time you see, or you're on the freeway, or you see something, do not drink anything that's labeled reclaimed. I mean, they say it won't, but I wouldn't drink it myself. You know, spots up the car. Now, maybe Chris Davey would.
No, I wouldn't.
Yeah, but you just never know where. They say it's awesome and it's clean. I say it's okay for the plants.
Only good for fertilizing your tomatoes.
Yep. And so that's awesome. Now, what you want to do is always size your valve with your flow control. So if you look at it and say, hey, I've got a 1-inch valve at my house and there's 6 of them in a row, you'll look at it and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to start turning it on so they're all getting 80, 85 PSI. Now, if I only have 6 heads on it, I turn the flow control down, and as the flow control goes down, when it dips, when the head dips, you turn it up a 1/4 turn. And now, instead of having the mist go by and like a car goes by or it doesn't evaporate, you want to make sure that you have fat water drops so it would land in a catch can for an audit. And you want to make sure that it's doing fine. So you want to make sure that you always check the valve and then make your adjustments in the field. Same 1-inch valve, you got 12 heads, you change the flow control a little different. If you've got 18 heads, you change a little different. Now, I mean, in most areas, usually in the United States, we're using 24 volts. But European market and all over the world, I know in Canada, I've had a lot of people, they use 220, but 110, and that is very. So make sure you're using a 24-volt solenoid just to make sure, and if I'm talking to people all over the place, you want to make sure that you're not sticking your hand in the water with 110. That'll be the last time that you stick your hand in the water, or it'll sure give you a shake. You know, Chris had a full head of hair before he stuck his hand in that water. Right, Chris?
I used to, yeah. That's why I stutter also.
Gee. So you got to make sure that the solenoid's off on the valve and that you're manually opening. Now make sure that if you ever replace any bolts, screws, nuts, washers temporarily, make sure you use the original manufacturer's stuff. You think, hey, I'm just going to go to my local hardware. Well, if you get the wrong one, it'll rot right out. So it gets corroded, and it ends up that the whole thing rots out. Okay, so now we're looking at, you can see the stem here. So on a brass valve, make sure if you have something like in San Diego, has a lot of nutrients in the soil. It's very hot there. So hot means that there's a lot of nutrients in the soil, and it will eat brass, it will eat at cast iron, and you got to make sure that you always check those parts, that there's no cracks or anything. So in the San Diego area, you want to make sure you use a lot more plastic product.
So just a quickie question here. A lot of people freak out when you say, hey, you can put a plastic valve in. They say, oh, I like the brass, it's sturdy. But what's your opinion?
Well, the plastic valve, it's different. When you look back maybe 20 years ago, the plastic was different. Now they're using a glass nylon. It's tougher then. Look at all the car parts. Look, when you look at all the cars, they're all made out of new plastics, new things that you would have never thought would be plastics. But the nutrients and all the stuff they do with plastics these days, it's much better than the brass or steel. It wears, it doesn't. Like all backflow parts, they used to have them all brass, but it eat at the side of the valves. And what that did is it did more damage than good, so they converted them all to a different type of plastic.
And the price is dramatically different.
Yes, absolutely. And especially dirty water, particles. So I would say if anybody's in areas where you get a lot of calcium and a lot of stuff, you would want to make sure that you use a plastic valve. They are don't think of plastic like the old days 20 years ago. It's much better.
Right. And just to chime in, because I know people are listening and watching, your code to send into the Irrigation Association is WZ-4. And we stick it in the middle of this so we know people are going to listen and watch it so they know. Again, it's W as in William, Z as in zebra, -4. That's the code you give when you send it into the IA that proves that you listened or watched the show. So we'll go back to Richard.
Okay, well, awesome. And what I'm showing in the picture here is that the stem. So all valves have a lot of stem. So on the forward flow, if that, you can see that brass stem. So Superior and that manufacturer, the new ones were brass. And after several years, it's going up and down, and the orifice on it became larger and larger. So when you see your valve and it starts shuddering, and goes off, or and comes on, that means more water pressure is going to the upper part of the body. The 80-20 rule is out the door. So you have to make sure that that you change the diaphragm, change all the stuff, and really inspect them, and make sure that if the hole's bigger than it used to be, make sure you change it out. So now here, I was out actually in Palm Springs doing a big class, and I was listening to one of the guys, and he was tearing duct tape and putting it on the diaphragms. That does not work.
Oh, yeah, that'll work.
Yeah. So that, I have that in because you never know. Make sure, absolutely, I know I'm repeating myself, that you have a professional. Some people in areas like that will put the duct tape on it. It'll last a couple weeks. Oh, well, I'm sorry, you need something else. So there are people out there that don't have your normal ethics.
And they have to inspect it very good, make sure there's no debris or little things that will prevent it from closing completely, and wipe it off before they put it back.
Yeah, and make sure that, you know, that you have references that you can call back. So there's lots of technicians doing repairs, and some are super good, but then you got other people that are doing it on the sly, and they work somewhere else, and maybe they use used parts. Not everybody has the same ethics, you know, so make sure that they don't do anything like that. And you can see I asked this guy, and he put an oversized O-ring, and I was looking in the back of his truck, and I go, what do you, oh no, I just ripped it out and put a brand new valve in. That would have been like a $3, $4 part, and the valve would have worked. And it really bothers me when I see people taking advantage of the elderly, like Chris Davey, and that his valve. And you know, Rob was right there, and then they move the O-ring, and they go, hey, replace it. But see, Rob has the knowledge behind him, and then so he makes it all, you know, work. So that, you know, the reason why I'm showing that is, you have to know your sprinkler systems when you have a house. Don't count on the technician. Make sure you know. Now, you may hire them and let them do them, but make sure that he's not taking advantage of you and just ripping out a valve. So sometimes when they say, oh, well, I'm only $20 an hour, don't worry. They're going to make up that money somewhere else.
Yeah, there's not that many things that can go wrong with the valve to begin with, and if you know the basics, whether you got a crack, whether you have a bad diaphragm, whether you have a bad solenoid, those are the things that's really important. I mean, there's only a certain amount of things that can go wrong with the valve.
Absolutely.
And a lot of HOAs get taken advantage of because they come and say, hey, or the maintenance people say, hey, you need a whole new valve, and it's $100 and something to replace it. But the same with homeowners. It's good to know. You know, it's good to have some knowledge about all of this. So again, this show is good because we try to show the DIY people that, and we also try to give some more education to the professionals because it's an important thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you have to say about the picture on the screen there, Richard?
That is the oversized O-ring where the bleed screw where they took advantage of the person.
That was Chris Davies' O-ring, right?
Yeah.
Yes, that's where I went.
That was, yeah. I mean, Chris holds on to every penny he has. So, where here is that if you have to always check on all your valves and make sure where that little groove is where the solenoid, that's where the water drops out. And I was noticing, I kept on getting people bring into classes and say, what's wrong with this? And I would take the nipple out, and what was happening, they used pipe dope, which you shouldn't. And what it was doing, it was going over the threads and covering that hole. So just make sure that people are aware that what they're doing, because very quickly people just go ahead and say, oh, well, it's a valve, let me put a new one in, you know, and it may not be. And so, you know, this is just a quick little, if you have a manual brass valve and you're filling your pool or anything else, you use a automatic adapter. So where that valve is, they come in plastic, they come in brass. You know, I mean, Iritrol has them. Lots of people have them. Pick a good quality one that you would get from a commercial place, and you'll be fine with it. And make sure. So they're really, really nice to have to convert your stuff. Now here I'm looking at, you got forward flow, reverse flow valves, and every different combination. You have brass, anti-siphon, and inline valves. So as you can see on there, yep.
And one thing I think is important also, if you stay with the top brands, you really get what you pay for. And whether it's a Rainbird, a Toro, an Iritrol, Weathermatic, Hunter, if you stay with those top brands, you get a good product. And that's important. Those companies have been around for a long time. They're well established. They're not going to go out of business. And your chances are having a much more long-term effect by using the better products.
Absolutely. Now, with this picture right here, I mean, you know, Rainbird had these brass valves. You had to have a solenoid wrench. Don't grab the stem. A lot of people, the first thing they do is take a pair of channel locks, grab the stem and turn it. It'll just snap off. So go to your local distributor and change it out. So as you can see, I've shown Rainbird, Hunter, Toro, everybody. They all have flow control, and they all have inline valves on it. So even the most reasonable one you get, or the more expensive one that you get. So make sure you always, if you slightly go to every single thing, every valve in the market and everybody just adjusted it to the sprinkler heads, we'd be saving thousands and thousands of gallons of water. Instead of it's having it mist and spray all over the sidewalk is just a no-no. We don't want to have water spraying on the sidewalk and water going down the curve and being wasted.
Using net flow control is so important, Richard.
Absolutely. Now this was an old 6100 diaphragm, and the people had it for years, and it worked and worked until some rocks got in the bottom and disturbed it. This was in the 30s, right when Chris was maybe 17, 18 years old.
That's about right.
Yeah. So he had that. So that diaphragm was there, and that's an old diaphragm, but it just shows you that an irrigation system can work. So there's another picture of it. Always make sure with all replacements, you check everything and make sure that everything's taken care of. We'll go ahead and go quicker on this because we're running out of time. Most of your consumers will not have a Griswold valve. But if you're in Irvine or Orange County, you may have those valves. So these are all the key things that you have. If you enjoy the PowerPoint, need copies, or need something, you can go to, like Rob said, hey, to YouTube or Google, and this show is available. You can go to the past and say, hey, that speaker was, 6 months ago. I really love the way she talked or he talked. I want to hear that story again. You can go back to that.
You want to give one or two words about Valcon while we have that slide up?
Well, let me just interject here. One thing that's really important is older the valves, the solenoid changes.
Yeah.
The electronics or electrical performance
The ohms
change,
on it.
right? And that can be a big difference on hooking to a different clock and so forth. So, depending on how old the system is, and it's something important to check.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the current draw is going to be totally different.
Absolutely. So every solenoid. So if you have a little multimeter and you have one and say, what's the ohms on that? If you go to a retail place and get a plastic adapter and stick it on it, it will be 54, 55 ohms. Now you think, hey, I'm going to get that and put it on another valve, a commercial valve. And when you put it on a commercial valve, it's not going to run a half a mile or several thousand feet. So you're not going to be able to do that. This is an old Valcon. Valcon was everywhere in commercial work. And what we want to do is make sure that it works the same way as everybody else. Very hard to find parts for. It was an awesome valve, but it's had its day, and then you can be looking and call us, and we'll lead you to a really good commercial valve out in the market. But you can see if you've had it, you got your money's worth out of it. So it really did well. So the other thing to let you know, just offhand, we'll just go ahead and go through the Valcon pictures, is that anytime you look at a valve and you see a red and a black wire coming out of the solenoid, you go, what is that for? And that's for DC latching solenoids. So, I mean, there's a lot of battery-operated units. If you have a little garden in your backyard, you're growing some vegetables, or you just have a little around your patio of an apartment or anywhere else, you don't want to have to put in a big clock and everything else. You just got a little one station. And several people make a really good DC latching solenoid. So you want to make sure that it's a 12-volt red. And so if you try that on your regular one and put it to a little DC clock, it won't work. You have to change the solenoid and to that valve. It'll be perfect. You can have it in the backyard and grow some tomatoes, whatever you want to, or around your patio for all your indoor and outdoor plants there. So we want to make sure. Now we'll go quicker here. These are all retail. So these are valves that are a little different. When you see something shiny, it's probably made out of ABS. So you always want to pick a better quality glass nylon valve that's out there. And every factory has them. So don't ever think, Toro, everybody has 3 or 4 different valves. One that's been sold at the hardware stores, and then one that's sold at commercial. And there is a big difference between each one. So you can see that some are different glass nylon. We're just going to flip through these pictures. Here's the Toro product, and it's excellent. This is green lawn. You want to pick the same. What you want to do is make sure that you have the right screws, the right bolts, and everything's fine. So, always look. If we can help you at all on any of your valve problems, feel free to get a hold of the station or get a hold of us at Irrigator Tech.
And how can they get a hold of you to answer some more questions?
Yep. All they have to do is go to irrigatortech.com, and we have our number on an 866 number, so it's an 800 number. Call us. We love to help people and troubleshoot and make sure that you get good professional contractors in the field doing your work that are highly educated and that you feel like you got your money's worth.
Absolutely. And again, if you need references, you can also use Irrigator Tech, but also contact the irrigation.org. Great organizations. They nothing but professionals. And don't feel bad if you're a DIYer. Call. We love to give you information and help on that as well. Yes, it's your home and you want it to look beautiful. So anyway, thanks a lot. And don't forget, your code for today's show is W as in William, Z as in zebra, -4. That's what you send to the Irrigation Association. Shows you that you listened or watched the video. All right, thanks. You have a great week. And the most important thing that we all have to do is to think blue. Good night, everybody. Have a good week.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, 106.5 FM, and now 102.3 FM.
With the World Health Organization now classifying the overuse of online gambling as a gaming disorder,